I felt myself disappear, evaporate, and the only thing that remained, the only word that I could possibly use was soul. And the only feeling that I could feel was that I merged with God. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I have a lot of things to think through. And I still have my criticisms of the way that capital R religion has been played out. But I also saw the world in an entirely different way. So I stayed up all night writing, and it reformed my whole concept. And now I find that deep connection with God. And it's funny because even using the word God is like, I find myself self-censoring it because there's other people like,
a lot of people do. I've noticed
and
that.
It's like, this should be the best word that you could use. You know, like you should be able to say God in any crowd and people go, oh yeah, God.
Yeah.
And it's I think one of the maladies that we have now is people's disconnection from God. And I'm fine with all the other words, source, universe, spirit, the one, you know, whatever you want to say. But that connection is also one of the things that I think is missing in our world, because it helps you have a little bit of distance from this fusion with your identity structure, which is just a temporary way that you can navigate this life. But the unborn and undying nature of your soul, if you don't have any idea to that, I don't think you can see the way between good and evil. I don't think you can let your identity go, because it's all that there is.
Yeah. And it often leads to nihilism. I mean, the way I've described it to people, again, regardless of their religious faith or lack thereof, is there always has to be something at the top of the hierarchy. So if you think of the hierarchy of morality or of power, there has to be something at the top. Everything in life, everything, there's always hierarchies. Okay. So if you talk to someone who is a theist, regardless of their religion, and you're like, you know, what's at the top of the moral, ethical power hierarchy? The answer is simple. God. God is at the top, right?
Yeah.
So if theoretically you move, you know, you push God out of there, there still has to be something at the top. And that typically becomes either the state, with whatever the ideology is and the political system is, it typically either becomes the state or it becomes yourself. Right? It could also become some other type of ideology that people then, we were already talking about making science a religion, and it then becoming very rigid and not really becoming science anymore. But there just has to be something at the top there. And there will be people who are atheistic, or they're not people of, you know, a traditional faith, and they can find a way to navigate without that, or with that kind of like uncertainty or whatever it may be, or taking notes from their culture, from the history, from, you know, just social norms or whatever it is. But it doesn't scale to hundreds of millions or billions of people, right? This is the point I often make when I come across, you know, you obviously get different types of atheists, but you have the ones who are kind of just like, whatever, I just don't really believe. And then you have the sort of like militant anti-theistic ones who believe that the world would just be better if like nobody believed in God, and you could just get rid of like all this superstition, all these religions, if we could just get rid of it all, then we'll have, you know, a sort of more kumbaya, happy, more peaceful, less war, like better, more ethical society. And I'm just like, I think that is absolutely wrong. And I'm not even using that as a case for my faith. I'm just saying, I think like logically and pragmatically, that way of thinking is very flawed. And I see the opposite going on, right? I think you get way more mental illness. You'll have people have less meaning, less purpose, less guidance, less clear guidance for their ethics, morality, whatever. It'll just devolve into, you know, do what thou willst, right?
And this postmodern ideology, which is post-truth, which is everything is a story and a construction, which goes into this discussion of biological men and women.
Yes.
Right? At the point where there's no such thing as truth, because to me, God, truth, love, value, they're synonyms in different ways. They have different flavors, but they're all pointing to the same thing. There's a structure of the cosmos that is actually something that we all have to live within. And it's just the nature of reality. But if you throw all of that out of the window and everything is just a story. Everything is a construction. There's no such thing as good and evil. There's no such thing as right or wrong.
No truth.
No such thing as there's no truth.
Yeah.
We're in this kind of post-truth moment in this post-modernity where people are just losing their way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's literally a pregnant man emoji in our fucking phones.
Yeah.
Like, what are we
doing?
the fuck are we talking about? And of course, gender. I have a brother who's born a woman, expresses now as a man, and it's like, beautiful man. Fucking, like, I was like, is it cool if I call you brother? Like, that seems to be, it's what I feel when I feel from you. You know, but let's not be confused.
Biology still
You're
exists.
not going to impregnate a woman with your semen.
Yes.
Like, that's reality. That's her sex, and so, but even a simple thing like that, people are getting confused.
Yeah, because ultimately everything becomes subjective, and it just becomes people's opinions and feelings against other people's opinions and feelings. And you have no ground to stand on to say, okay, this is the sort of bedrock of what we're aspiring towards, or what is real, or what is truthful. And that's ultimately what it devolves into. And it won't devolve into that for every single individual. Sometimes I speak on these things, and people get very defensive because they think I'm like targeting them as an individual, whereas I'm speaking about humanity collectively, right? Someone will come in and say, oh, like, you don't need to be religious to be a good person. I was like, I have never in my life said you need to be religious to be a good person. That would be an asinine comment. It would also be an asinine comment to say that by being religious, you are a good person. I can think of lots of terrible people currently and historically who claim to be Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever, and their behavior and their hearts are very dark, and they do terrible things to people, right? I'd say they're missing the most basic commandment in the thing, right? Jesus himself criticized such people, right? It's not a new thing. And of course, there can be someone, I know people who are quote unquote atheists, and their lives look more similar to a Christian who is doing their best to walk with Christ,
right,
in terms of what they actually do day to day and how they treat other people. So all of these things are, I'm talking about when you scale to millions, when you scale to billions of people, we need we need operating systems. I think it's funny. Like, I often put myself like in other people's brains, and I just try to see the world from different angles. So sometimes I imagine, obviously I'm a theist, but I can imagine, okay, let me just put myself in the shoes of the worldview of someone who just absolutely doesn't believe in God and everything's just evolution and it's biology and so on. It would still be the case from that perspective that human beings are very obviously a religious species, right? So it would still be the case that through the mechanisms of evolution, human beings have evolved to a stage where 90% of the 8 billion people in the world believe in God. Still, right? After all this time, 90% of the world's population still believes. So I'm like, okay, even if that was true, it's like, well, wouldn't that have like died out or like something? When it's existed for that long, it's like, well, this is clearly within people. And when you see these people who also will say that they're not religious, but then they take another ideology, it could be, how many people have made politics their religion, man? Come on. Like, I see it every day. I'll have someone comment on something. I'll say, I might just mention God in a post, and someone will comment and talk, that's mumbo jumbo, sky fairy, whatever. Religion's all a bunch of crap. I click on their profile. Everything is about, like, they've made their religion either like being MAGA or being anti-MAGA or being whatever. Like, every single post, every single thing, even their bio, it's all like they've just taken politics and all of their zealotry, all of their religious energy is now in politics. And it's just like, dude, you've just swapped out. You've swapped out that belief system. You've just replaced it with something else. Like, your entire worldview is just like seeing people as the left and the right, and going super hard for one side and super against the other. And it's funny. It's like you yourself can't see that's what you've done. And people can do this with all sorts of different belief systems. People can even do it with something as simple as like their diet and their nutrition. where like,
Sure.
I'll tell you something, Aubrey. I'll tell you something. I've never,
Carnivorism.
Yep.
Whatever. Either way, both sides.
Yep. I'll tell you something. I get asked a lot, given that I'm quite outspoken with, you know, across all these different things, podcasts, social media. I often get asked like, have you ever lost a friend because of your political views? Or have you ever lost a friend, you know, over your thoughts on this or that? You know, the answer is no. I lost 0 friends during the whole scamdemic era. I was very vocal. I was very clear on my stance on masks, on lockdowns, on, you know, the shot, whatever, the mandates. I lost 0 friends. 0 friends. A lot of people can't say that. Like lots of people. I have lost a friend over nutrition. I have lost a friend. You know, I had a friend, and he became a vegan.
Uh-huh.
You know, not just like hey, I'm not gonna eat meat, but like anyone who eats meat or animal products is now evil and wicked.
Right.
So all of his previous friends who, you know, he stopped eating meat, and he adopted the worldview to a degree that, okay, well, anyone who still engages this is obviously immoral, unethical, or whatever. And, you know, I haven't spoken to him since, right? He just abandoned, right? I can now only, and you get people like that. I know plenty of cool vegans who are like, I know vegans who prefer to hang out with meat eaters because they find other vegans insufferable. But there's vegans who only will be friends with other people who are vegans. Like they are more pious in that sense than the average Christian or Muslim or Jewish people. Like, I've got friends who I'm like, I'm not going to like, I will only be friends with and I will only talk to Christians.
Right.
Like that would be pretty extreme. That's a pretty extreme position. And I'm like, man, you've done that with something that's even more niche and which isn't even supposed to be a religion to begin with. So people can really take that seed and take it to weird places.